Good afternoon, everybody. Eddie Webb. We are here at the new Media Lab at Mesa Community College, and today we're very, very happy to have our own Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dr. Nora Reyes, with us today. And for the listeners, we have a team of faculty and staff who, for our guests, we pull up questions. I must say, Dr. Reyes has received, I think, the most questions we've had for a guest. We try to limit our stuff to 13. I don't know if we'll get to all of them today. And if I would stop talking, we could get to them. Dr. Reyes, how are you this morning?
Doing great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for accepting our invitation to come on down. Although I think I've been here 21 or 22 years. I think we've been here almost the same amount of time. It's been really nice to watch your career blossom and watch you go from a teacher to leadership and now a senior vice president in our organization. That must be a very rewarding experience.
Well, my whole journey in higher education within Mesa Community College specifically has been extremely rewarding, yes.
Yeah. So I want to know a little bit about your academic background. I sat in on your public forums when you were applying for the position you have now. And you talked about the small town that you grew up off of Highway 8. Is that right?
That's right.
Tell me about that. I want to know all about that culture there with education, the schools. And
Oh, my. Okay, you'll take me way back. My roots are in rural Arizona. I was born in Yuma, which was 50 miles away, the biggest city that was nearby. We would go there fairly often, maybe once a week or every other week to get groceries. Growing up in rural our house was in the middle of 4 fields. So we had the crop dusters flying over our head, and we had a lot of space. We could see nature all around us, the crops growing, the birds chirping, the locusts sometimes when we had those raids. But it was a wonderful, wonderful place to grow up. I realize now how sheltered I was. I did go to Mohawk Valley Elementary School, which was a kindergarten through 8th grade school, and the whole population of our area was about 1,000 people, and that probably encompassed several little areas: Tacna, Roll, Antelope Valley. So there were a few areas that we just called home, surrounding areas. The schools, everybody knew one another. I remember going to school initially in the era when we weren't allowed to speak our native language. And there were some teachers who would take a ruler to our hands if we spoke, in my case, Spanish. So I quickly learned English. It was my second language. I'm the youngest of 7 children. So I come from an immigrant Mexican family. And so living in rural Arizona, it was like living in Little Mexico. In my household, it was Spanish with my parents until my siblings began to speak English after enrolling in school, and then they started speaking English with one another. So I was a baby. I was born, I like to say I was conceived in Mexico, but born in the USA. So I'm the only one in my family who was actually a natural born U.S. citizen. But going into life with older siblings who entered school before I and learned English before I did, it incentivized me to learn very quickly, not only wanting to avoid getting slapped by a ruler for speaking Spanish, and it's not funny, but what you don't want to cry about, you laugh about. So I learned English very quickly when my next older siblings would speak to one another in English so that I couldn't understand. The motivation was strong. High school I was in one of the largest graduating classes of a whole whopping 75, I think it was. And that tells you how small our area was. Antelope High School served an area of about a 50-mile radius all the way out to Dateland. And so It was very rural, and everyone kind of knew each other's business, which is a beautiful thing and a horrible thing. So I said earlier, it was a wonderful place to grow up. It really was. But at the same time, I was really ready to leave when I graduated from high school. The very next day, I headed out to Tempe, Arizona to live with my brother, who was already attending Arizona State University, and I had enrolled in summer school. So started the Monday after graduating, the previous Friday from high school, started summer school at ASU. I was a little eager to get out, despite how much I appreciate having grown up in the beautiful Valley of Roll.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, so early on in life, you actually experienced this sort of disconnect between cultures of what was acceptable and not acceptable, especially around language, which must motivate you today to bridge that gap, huh?
Oh, absolutely. And going back to your original question about my academic journey, when I was in grade school, about sixth grade, my oldest sister, who's 14 years older than I, she was already a practicing teacher here in the Phoenix area. And when we'd come to Phoenix to visit her, there was a time when I visited her classroom, and I remember going home that day. It was a third grade classroom, going home that day with a pile of love notes from these little third graders. I had so much fun working with these kids, and I fell in love with it. And that was my first recognition that this is something I would really love to do, making an impact on young lives. And I was just in sixth grade at the time, and through my adolescent years and into high school, I explored a few other things I'd like to do. Going from when I was in kindergarten, I wanted to be a cashier so I could punch the numbers on the cash register. That was my first aspiration. And that moved into, that introduction to teaching. So I was intrigued in sixth grade. I had opportunities to work on the high school newspaper as an editor. So then I toyed with journalism. And then I thought, but I really love working with kids. So I didn't have any other forms of social life, really. I was kind of a geek and thought, well, maybe I'll be a pediatrician. And then October 22nd, 1982, my now husband held my hand and my plans for life changed. Thought, okay, I'm going to have a social life now. I want to have a family. So I'm going back to teaching. And indeed, that was the path that I took, and no regrets there for sure. Now back to the language piece. My sister did have a bilingual endorsement, and she worked as a bilingual teacher. She also had her special education endorsement. I didn't observe her special ed classrooms, but I had been in, being a native Spanish speaker, I was very intrigued with the bilingual education component, and so I did pursue that, and it was extremely fulfilling because I felt that I was able to use the natural resource that I had of my own language and encourage others, not only serve as a positive role model for others who were entering the system without the language of our society here being English, having to learn that and knowing the challenges that come along with that. It enabled me to work with that population of students in a way that I could really tap into what my experience had been and connect with those students to hopefully make a very positive difference for their lives.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful story. I share a little bit of that journey with you, coming from field workers. That was my family. I actually didn't work in the fields. I worked in the orchards. By that time, my family had left Firebaugh north of Bakersfield and settled in Butte County, and we worked picking peaches, and that was just us, my farm workers, and I love that culture. Recently I've been going to Nogales and filming because for some reason I'm really drawn to all these border issues, this clash of cultures between a country that claims liberty and freedom and also built on immigrants who now, we've got a wall. So I'm just been spending a lot of time down there. I wish I could speak Spanish.
Mm.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful language, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Languages are just beautiful, and learning more languages just expands your open-mindedness, I believe, and it actually gives you more cognitive flexibility, which is why I think it's really important for us to encourage multilingualism, an expanded view of the world, a bit broader perspective and appreciation for others.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, growing up around a lot of activists, American Indian activists, most of my life since I think my dad took me to a meeting in 74, 75 is when I really got to be around a lot of activists. And, you know, they were very resistant to this notion of a melting pot America, but because we wanted to keep our own indigenous identities. We didn't want to be part of a melting pot. And I think people are finally kind of coming around to what that really means in terms of appreciating our differences and not trying to assimilate everybody into one thing. We are Americans, and what makes America great is our diversity, you know?
Indeed.
And
it makes it such a rich, rich combination of cultures.
Yeah. And at a college, you know, that's what you get to experience. That's what I'm so still, after all these years, in love with teaching. When I'm in here and I'll have the full spectrum, you know, of students and bring them together. One of my most memorable projects to date is still the guy who was the president of our atheist club on campus and the guy who was very active in the Mormon church. And I teamed those two guys up to do a project, and it was absolutely amazing. You know, I love that. I love that kind of stuff, bringing our strengths instead of our, you know, making us weaker because of our differences. It should make us stronger.
Right. And learning from one another instead of viewing those differences as negatives,
right?
Viewing them as opportunities to learn and grow as individuals and as a society.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're so fortunate that we get to be involved with that part of our country, you know, building critical thinking and culture.
The beauty of education, indeed.
Yeah. And so here you are now, the Senior Associate Vice President of Mesa Community College, one of the biggest community colleges in the United States, if not in the world, you know, at least in the top 20, I would guess, top 10 maybe. And all the way from Dateland. I love
Roll,
Dateland.
Arizona.
That's
Roll.
Right. Yeah, well, your people must be very, very proud of you. Yeah, that's another thing. When you said Dateland, my grandpa used to drive us to Palm Springs to a place called Hatley's, and they sold date shakes. And that was our big summer trip, was to get a date shake.
Oh,
you know?
yeah, they're great.
So, hey, I guess since we've been here almost the same amount of time, we've been through a lot of presidents and vice presidents and deans and stuff over the years. That seems to be a bit of the culture of Maricopa admin positions. Is a lot of people are moving around quite a bit. And our first question here is, how has the role of Senior Associate Vice President changed from the original vision that our former President Rich had for the position? And I'm not even sure how you would know that. Totally.
Exactly. Exactly. When we were finally able to bring that to a reality, that's when everything changed. You know, I was hired in mid-December of 2019, a little after mid-December. So it was right at the end of the semester. And it was the following month, within a month of my being hired into this position, Rich indicated that he would be retiring the end of January. So we didn't really get to see it implemented in alignment with what I imagine was his vision, because shortly after, well, of course, when he retired, the executive vice president, which was a brand new position as well as were our senior associate vice president positions was no longer, because that position turned into the interim president, Lori Burquam. So we no longer had that full vision to be able to implement. And it was a little bit muddy because we had just accepted and plunged into this new commitment of having president, EVP, SAVPs, which was unique to the district. So it was no longer in alignment with what other colleges have as VPA and VPSA. We had 2 SAVPs that were overlapping and working closely together, intended to work with the EVP, but again, that was a gap. It's still a gap in the structure. So we've been functioning pretty much as our sister colleges, with the president working with 2, well, in this case, working with our college academic officer and our college student affairs officer. So instead of, I think the way we align now, although we're SAVPs, not VPs, we align by saying we're the college academic officer and the college student affairs officer, Carmen, my counterpart. And the beauty of having the titles that we do have, though, is our intentional efforts. It's a constant reminder that we really need to be working together across areas, and we need to be breaking down barriers and increasing our levels of collaboration. So it certainly has kept this intent at the front of mind, and I do believe that is aligned with the original vision that Rich had for the positions. But again, it's definitely a very different iteration, and needless to say, just a couple months after that, we went into COVID mode. So the transition into our roles has been somewhat bumpy, and certainly not as we had any of us expected.
Well, you've certainly, amidst all of that, got a lot done internally in terms of filling positions and seats. I feel like we kind of get on the regular basis a call for hiring committees within our structure to shore up those positions. And it looks like you all have been very successful at filling vacant positions that, we need to function. And just for our listeners, MESA is known for their acronyms. So Dr. Reyes was speaking. She wasn't speaking in code. She was speaking in MESA.
Which one did I use? I try to be careful with those.
The acronyms. Yeah.
EVP, SAVP.
Yeah, all that cool stuff. Yeah. Well, it was interesting to have somebody kind of come in, and we all were so compliant with kind of shaking it up a little bit and reorganizing, and then the gentleman decided to retire. But we're going to be just fine. The next question are, what are some of the challenges that you see with our current organizational structure? Or did you kind of speak to that? Or
Well, a little bit, but a couple of other things that come to mind include interims are really challenging. And so we've worked really hard to try to fill the interims that we've been able to fill. We need that stability within our system, but it's also nature of the beast. We're always going to have positions being vacated, and that's normal, and it can be healthy. So that is certainly an ongoing challenge that's never going to go away. We do want to add as much stability to the system as possible by minimizing the number of interims and making decisions expeditiously so that we don't have long-term interims, which has been problematic at some points. So that's certainly a challenge. As far as our current organizational structure, also, when I first came into this role, Carmen and I together, and Lori had been in her executive VP position for just 6 months or less than that. So she had just arrived in the summer of 2019. We came into our new roles in December of 2019, and then the craziness of 2020 hit. So the December that we were all together, we began a road trip across the different campuses. And January, we were full force going through some listening sessions with various groups across campuses. We really wanted to hear what others thought, including this very question, what are we challenged with? How can we be better? How can we organize ourselves in a way that really optimizes the talents that we have and the resources that we have. So we worked hard during that period of time pre-COVID, during those whole 3 months that we had, trying to come up with a structure that would be responsive to what we were hearing from folks at the listening sessions. And many of our MCC community has seen the final iterations of that. I went through a number of iterations, and you may be able to envision those 6 different ovals that we came up with, representing functional areas across student affairs and academic affairs that would help us to better organize ourselves. So we're still working with that, and we're still moving toward optimizing the organization within those larger areas and meeting with folks within those areas to make sure that we move forward in a manner that is truly in alignment with that, while also taking into consideration new information that we're getting. Challenges, sometimes we put forward proposals that, if not fully understood and vetted, may not be supported. And so I think a big challenge is always communicating well to all the constituents and to all of our key stakeholders that may be impacted. And as committed as we may be to that, we are a very large institution, and everybody's really super busy. So even when we try very hard to communicate out and be as transparent as possible, sometimes we miss a group, or sometimes somebody doesn't see an email or isn't an intranet post or an important report, or isn't able to attend an important forum. And so there may be some gaps in people's understanding of why we get to certain places. So that's a constant challenge that we need to continue working on, and establishing strong relationships across areas. What's been a huge challenge has been maintaining strong connections and relationships during this pandemic, because when we're doing everything virtually and we don't have an opportunity to pop into people's offices or even have those hallway conversations that we used to have, it makes us feel very distanced from one another and sometimes disconnected. And that's a real unfortunate thing, particularly when we're going through huge transitions as an institution and changes in leadership. People don't have an opportunity to connect as strongly as they need to build the trust and rapport that is really needed to move forward.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I strongly believe in communication and transparency. I think that is the heart of a healthy institution, especially a public institution. If we were a private institution, that's one thing, but we are a public institution, and there is a structure. I had a meeting with the folks at the district a few weeks ago, and the presentation I gave on the drive down there was phenomenal. Then when I got there, I forgot like half of it. I was like, I got to write this stuff down sometimes. But, I wanted to stress the point, because people keep talking. We're talking at that time about the system, the system. And I have always been an advocate for people. There is the system is people. It's individuals. It's, even as far back as Dr. Pan, before I really understood data in the way that I do now, postdoctorate, I always would say, we have to humanize the data, always pushing that part of it, And I think that's what you've just spoke to, and it's really, I hope listeners key in on that sense of your awareness, that this is about community and communication. I just think one of the first books I read in high school was Kennedy's book, I think Profiles in Courage. He said that his whole practice was, if he made the people around him successful, then he would be successful. He understood that it wasn't about him. It was about empowering the people around you. And so when I always say that, that's what I'm talking about. Make sure we empower and make the people around us successful, and therefore we will be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the mark of a true leader
That's right.
will empower those around them. And our job as leaders is not to be front and center. It's to be holding others up and helping others to move to their center and to reach their capacity.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all about building bridges, building trust, establishing that strong sense of relationship.
Yeah. And consistency, as you say, stability, all of those things are excellent leadership qualities. What are some accomplishments that you would like to highlight?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind with this tumultuous last 18 months or so, what an incredible accomplishment it was for us to get where we are today. March of 2020 was unbelievable, something none of us have faced in our lives. And the way that our faculty and staff had to pivot mid-spring semester was just impressive. Nothing less than just incredibly impressive. So a huge shout out and pat yourselves on the back. It was quite a feat we had to accomplish. And yeah, we stumbled, but we did the best we could with what we had. And we had a lot of successes within that. So I want to just acknowledge that was an incredible team effort, as well as an incredible individual effort on everyone's part, because we were all facing our own individual human challenges within our own families and networks. And yet professionally, we really stepped up. Folks really, really stepped up. And it showed how passionate we are about what we do, the lengths we were willing to go through to ensure that students could reach the highest level of success possible under the difficult circumstances that we were in. Folks just really stepped up. So hats off to everyone for that. Others that really come to mind in terms of accomplishments are a couple of huge grants that we've been awarded over the same period of time, challenging times, but incredible accomplishments with our Send-Us grant, $3 million grant over 5 years, our first HSI grant as a college. So that was a huge accomplishment with very, very important goals that are very much aligned with our college's strategic directions, looking at our equitable hiring practices, looking at professional development focused on mindfulness and culturally responsive practices, looking at integrated student supports so that we can ensure that the student experience is optimized and leads to student success. So Send-Us grant was a huge accomplishment. And very recently as within this past week, we got news that we've been awarded a second HSI grant. This is an HSI STEM grant for $4.3+ million over 5 years. So we're very excited about that as well. It's a grant that will allow MCC to provide additional opportunities for target audiences within our communities, opening up possibilities that otherwise they might not have. So we're really excited about moving forward with that.
So grants, I learned through Indian education, sometimes taking a grant is not always the best thing. Like sometimes grants can cost an institution money, right? Because if it only goes for a year or two and you build something successful, now you have something that you have to fund. But also, I had a question about how does that change the profile of the college? So are we very, very, I'm assuming we write these grants.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're very, very mindful that when we do receive these funds, it doesn't change the culture of our public education, that we are now accountable to. Are these government grants primarily or private grants?
The two I mentioned are Department of Education grants. Yeah, so government grants. And these two in particular, I know have been very much directly aligned with our college's strategic directions. All should be. Now, just as within each of our various department plans, our strategic planning should be aligned with the areas of focus within our strategic directions as a college, as well as our district's strategic directions and priorities. So when we do have that kind of focus, then things tend to move forward more sustainably.
Yeah.
Because as we write grants, for example, the two that I mentioned were very much aligned and took into account how much is the college willing to commit. This is going to be an institutional commitment. And within those grants, there is funding for some positions where we know we're going to grow and where we know we need additional supports. So knowing that, this provides us with a jump start. The grant funding allows for moving forward more quickly than the college resources would otherwise allow us to move forward. So we're able to move forward with additional support and then transition ourselves over that 5-year period into having full institutional support for those positions that we knew we were going to want to move toward anyway, but we're able to ease into it financially through those commitments. So you are absolutely right. I've experienced that as well in my past with grants. Be careful what you ask for because you might get it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we have to be very realistic and always write our proposals in ways where not only are we happy that we get what we ask for, but that it's sustainable, because there's nothing worse than having something great disappear after X amount of time once the grant funding is over. So we always want to plan for following the grant. What do we need to keep? What do we need to plan for as an institution so that we don't just lose all of that momentum that we've gained?
Right. Yeah. This is where experience and vision come into play in leadership. I think I do want to jump back real quick to something that you spoke of earlier. And I'm going to brag a little bit, because if you all have never experienced what it is like to take an entire institution who are meeting students face to face, and in a matter of weeks, take that entire organization into an online format without missing much of a beat in terms of when class starts and when it ends, and the curriculum and the access to the curriculum, having the right tools, and our folks over here. I mean, it was an incredible thing to watch people. I mean, for the English, I don't know about other departments, but we literally had to go through a training through Laura Ballard's group on how to teach online and how the software functioned and all of that stuff. And to watch people commit themselves to that was absolutely amazing. Now, here's the catch to that. How do we bring everybody back? Right? Because people spend so much time developing their curriculum on an online format. It's like bringing that back into the classroom, right? That's a whole nother challenge. How are we doing with that?
Indeed, it is a challenge. And there's a lot that's involved within that question. You know, there's a lot of emotional impact that leads to how people will respond. We need to take all of that into account. So realistically, I would like to think that we have learned so much, and we've learned a lot over throughout this experience with the pandemic, having to switch things up. Folks who never thought they'd be teaching online are teaching online. Folks who were well versed in teaching online are serving as mentors to others and discovering even more new tools. So it's actually been really exciting in terms of the learning curve and what folks have been exposed to that they otherwise wouldn't have potentially been exposed to, at least in so quickly. And so it has provided opportunities for growth in that way, and it has provided opportunities for us to better understand what student preferences are, what their success rates are in different course modalities. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to need to spend more time, and our faculty and our chairs have been doing that. Our deans have been doing that as well, looking at what are the success rates, where should we be focusing our attention in terms of where students perhaps aren't doing as well. How can we improve that? How can we improve those success rates? What modalities should we be offering certain courses in to optimize student success rates? And so all of those are questions that need to be thought through, looking at the data, trying to figure out what's the best alignment. Now coming back to campus, literally, I mean, in spring semester, we're targeting 65% of our courses being offered hybrid or in person. That means a lot more people on campus than we have had this past year because of the pandemic. Hopefully things will continue to move in a positive direction in terms of COVID numbers so that we can all feel safe doing that. With vaccinations available and more percentage of our population being vaccinated, we're hoping that that safety concern is minimized. We will continue to focus on folks' safety and wellness. We need to continue to consider everyone's emotional health and wellness as well. So this is a transition. I don't want to downplay it. I do like to be optimistic about things, but I also want to be realistic about this is an ongoing transition for us. And moving into spring semester is a big one. A big one because right now we're only at about 34% in-person hybrid. That's this semester. That's for next semester, we're looking at almost double. That means more of our faculty will be teaching more classes in person. We need to be mindful about equity issues and how those course modalities, how those course sections are assigned between adjunct faculty and residential faculty. I know that people want to come back, but I also acknowledge that it's hard. It is a transition. We've been used to doing things differently for a year and a half now, and now reality's hitting. It's coming very quickly, and the spring semester will be here soon. We've tried to put things in place where there's a more gradual transition and people begin feeling more comfortable. But I encourage everyone to continue to share what you're feeling and talk through your frustrations and allow yourself time to feel them, but also look forward and realign. Let's all realign with what we're here to do. What is our mission as a community college? How can we best meet that mission? How can we really meet the needs of our students in our community? We need to be transitioning toward that end more fully. And a lot of that is going to it'll make some of us more comfortable. It'll make some of us less comfortable. Eventually, I hope we can all have a somewhat smooth transition, but work through these together collaboratively, knowing that, going back to some of our initial comments, we're all human and we all have lives outside of work. And we do need to, just as we talk about looking at the comprehensive student experience, we need to think about our employees' experiences in that way as well.
Yeah, I'm highly confident that we're gonna do it, and we're gonna do it well. And I think, the variable that the kind of predictable variable is COVID itself and people's behavior around, what are we gonna do? And I think spring will be a nice transition to set us up for next fall. But the patience part of that is difficult when you're a teacher that's sold out 100%, your soul's into it. You just want to be with your students, like that's your world. And all of a sudden it's sort of a different way. I mean, I actually enjoy my live online courses. Yesterday was an amazing, amazing day of teaching online, but still, in here we like to feed. We have food in here all the time. There's just that cultural part of face-to-face that people are really hungry to get back to,
You know what, Eddie?
Yeah.
I think that relates to what we were commenting about the richness of diversity. There are, just like with our students, our employees too, some really thrive in certain modalities.
That's right.
But yet, a lot of our students do more than one modality.
Right.
Most of our students do. And so having options is really important, and recognizing that if it's all just one thing, it really isn't as rich and certainly not as inclusive as if you have more than one.
Yeah.
And so as we think about, we have students who may prefer online learning or may prefer in-person learning or may prefer hybrid. Likewise with our faculty, there are different preferences, but do we benefit from the various modalities? I think there's a lot to be said with that mix as well. And there's always pros and cons. When you're in person, there are certain things that you absolutely can benefit from that you can't benefit from online. You can't break bread together, when you're online.
Right.
Not literally. And there are certain things that you can't benefit from when you're in person that you can benefit from when you're online. For example, we can actually be more inclusive in terms of reaching out to more populations that otherwise wouldn't physically be able to attend in person. So there's pros and cons in any scenario. And that's why, again, going back to the richness of diversity, when we have a diversity of options as well, it can bring the best of all things together.
I totally agree. Distance learning has always been a part of education. How it's modernized and infused itself in today's modality is interesting, to see. And as you say, people have preferences. We've always been, a community college is, transitory by nature. People come here before work or after work, or it's not traditionally been a place for students to come and hang, the majority of the students to come and hang out and have the college experience like a university, because they have families and, a lot of our students come here that are working and their companies are paying their tuition, so they can better serve their companies and all of that sort of stuff. So I think it's a little easier for us to have multiple modalities where universities, I think the percentage is, I haven't looked lately, but, the percentages of distance learning versus, what's going to be required of coming to the college, the university itself, I think is going to start to flatten out again, those numbers in the next year or so. If you've been to Tempe lately, it looks like a small chunk of Manhattan. I don't think they want those apartments being empty, I think that whole thing is built around being a destination, but we have a little more different demographic, but kind of leads us to our next question too, because COVID jump-started technology like 5 years. Like when the New Media Lab started, we trained 77 faculty on how to create a media curriculum and how to deliver that, And then COVID hit and it was like, well, it's something everybody needs to learn to do. But in the process of that, there were a lot of faculty, a lot of faculty that just were at a time in their life that instead of learning all of this, whether it's Canvas or Blackboard or, whatever the modalities they're using, Google Meet or Zoom or WebEx, they just decided to retire, which I think is sad because, technology is just a tool, it's a hammer. But the wisdom of knowing how to build a house, the experience, that's something we really should value as well. And the next question lends itself to that. With the number of faculty retiring is increasing, but the number of faculty lines is decreasing. Do you feel this is sustainable? And how has this impacted departments in teaching and learning?
Yeah, this is another one of those real challenges because filling those voids is really important to every single one of those departments who have lost a faculty due to retirement or otherwise. And it's just not always feasible in terms of college resources. And right now, with our enrollments having taken such a dip, it's particularly challenging. But it can also be a double-edged sword, right? Because if you don't have enough faculty, then you can't grow and offer the sections that you would be able to offer if you had more faculty. So we're on an ongoing basis reevaluating, and every year we have our staffing committee who reviews all of the requests for residential faculty, and that is a very challenging review because we get always more requests than we can fill. And so that forces us to really look carefully at what are our priorities as a college, what is going to allow us to continue to meet the needs of our community in alignment with the workforce. We want to make sure that we graduate students who are able to either transfer to a university or go directly into the workforce, following a path that leads them to productive work, ultimately. And so we have to constantly look at those numbers and those needs and make some really, really hard decisions, because not all of the requests can be supported. It's simply, in my experience, there have never been the same number of requests put forward or submitted that can also be supported financially. We always get more than that. So that's a huge challenge. It's a combination of looking at what are we going to be losing if we don't fill the vacancy, but what can we afford to do with the resources available, and then determining or aligning all of that with where are our priorities and what are our commitments to the community and the workforce. So it's tough. It's a tough give and take, and it doesn't make everybody happy, sadly.
Yeah, and I think the nature of the question is just to sort of figure out what is the strategy and your role in this process. We just finished our podcast with Brad, who, is our money guy. And, I've brought this up before about our footsie model, that this sort of semester by semester it's just not a good way to run any kind of business. Like, we need a 3-year budget, or, because in the years I've been here, again, I've said this before, it's like, we talk about our enrollment, but we can never, like, what is the number? Is it 20,000? Is it 25,000? Is it 7? I can remember, again, a few presidents back who was like, we can't take any more students. Our infrastructure can't handle it. But for our student enrollment to go up in that way, it's the economy has to be kind of tanking, right? And we don't want that. We want a healthy economy. But I think the fact that we are subsidized, 70% of our income comes from taxes, that we should be able to create a pretty steady line if we would reconsider footsie. And I know I've been in a lot of debates over this, because if we do the blow by blow, well, we're up, this many students in the fall, but down this in the spring. And it just seems like it would make you all's lives a lot easier if you could say, okay, for the next 3 years, our budget's $100 million or $110 million. That's what we have. Roll with it. And if there's 12 students in this class, but there's 24 in this class, we're in the same, it's okay. We're in the same boat, because again, we're only relying on 30% of tuition anyway.
Right.
So, but I just hope and I think our new governing board and chancellor are working on this. I know they are, in fact, but I hope it sort of works itself out, because it seems so needless. There's always going to be a little bit of that with retirement and lines. We're always going to have that fluctuation, but the overall stability of the budget, I think we could do better. And it'll surely make your life a lot easier, I'm sure.
Everyone's lives,
Yeah,
because,
right.
Nobody likes that additional stress.
That's right.
And it is disconcerting when departments are putting in a request they feel is very important, but uncertain about its being supported. And it really isn't about supporting it. It's about what are our constraints financially. So your point is really well taken. I mean, it's an excellent point. We need a better strategy district-wide in terms of how we approach our funding, so that it can lead to more stability across multiple years, not just going 1 year at a time, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And it certainly doesn't put people's minds at ease.
Yeah. And I know a lot of that is connected to downtown. Our legislature has to step up and kind of redo the footsie model, kind of modernize, that funding model. But I understand it. I mean, I think those are my favorite classes at NAU, was understand the budget classes that I took. And I love budgets, and I didn't know I love statistics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because everybody told me my whole life, you're an artist. And it turned out I'm like, I love math.
That's awesome.
It's like my little secret, you know. But to understand the way, private business does it and the way we do it, we could do better. I think we can, and I think it's gonna happen.
We can always do better. And
We
I
can
just want to
always do
say, I
better.
think you mentioned hopefully it'll work itself out. I wish it were that easy. I don't think it will work itself out. I think it's going to take a lot of time and energy and
Will.
advocacy,
Yeah.
but I think the desire's there. And if we just need to stay focused on what we're here to do. And
Yeah.
again, if we
That's
really want to improve the experience of our students, our service to the community, and the experience of our employees who are serving our students and community, then we'll continue working to optimize those strategies that we're using to make things happen.
And I think the bold move here is to really get with accreditation and our legislatures and kind of reorg our governing board in terms of, this is why democracy is messy. But, there has to be, and when it comes to being on a board of an educational institution, I think we need there should be a level of qualifications, right? Rather than just political emotive. And I know I don't want to get into that a lot here, but I'd like to see some of that happen. That's the big, bold thing is, those sorts of qualifications, people that are really well-versed in education and higher education and what we do.
And whose hearts are aligned with our mission and vision and values.
Nice. Yeah, that would be nice too, right? I mean, disruptive politics, I think we've all gotten tired of that. We got a good thing going. The 4-year degree, what's happening there? I know you just did a big presentation to the faculty senate. How's it going?
Well, this is a really exciting time for Maricopa community colleges, for colleges across the state with this new legislation that's been approved. What is going to come of it? It's going to be what we make happen. And this is a district-wide effort. It's not going to be college by college, but we're trying to be very intentional and collaborative across the board so that we can, again, optimize the resources that we do have and provide as inclusive of opportunities as possible across Maricopa. And so we're awaiting some additional information from district regarding what specific programs will be supported at a district level. We're also working closely with our sister colleges for a regional approach. So we're going to be engaged in meetings regionally. For Mesa, that means working with Scottsdale, Rio, and Chandler Gilbert to determine what are some opportunities for programming that can be regionalized in our areas and where might it make the best sense for these to be offered in the East Valley. So more communications to come, certainly, but very exciting times and certainly an area of opportunity, particularly as we face low enrollment right now. This is an area that could really help with our enrollments and provide increased opportunities and access for our populations that we serve within our communities.
I think it's one of the most exciting changes in community college.
Indeed.
We had Dr. Thor on.
Mm-hmm.
And, it gets me so excited because I want the New Media Lab to become a part, like if we were a university, I'd like us to become like a college. I mean, ASU, pretty much everything that we've done here, they've got $53 million building in partnership with Mesa, the mayor, to build an institution like this little room we have, they're going to be doing on a grand scale. And those folks are coming over for a podcast soon. We want to build an articulation with them. And I think it's exciting. And I like big, bold things, So I think the 4-year degree to me is just super exciting. And there's a part of me that I've said this on air before, and I know I shouldn't, but I really want to. There's parts of me that I want to beat Michael Crow at something. I mean, the guy's like taking over the planet. I want to beat him somewhere, some small thing, But I know we have to partner with those guys to be successful. But you know what I mean?
Yes.
He doesn't mess around, that guy.
Right.
So our final question here is come really from a faculty around the district. And again, we just have a small group of folks that talk, are invested in Maricopa. We love Maricopa. And when Rich, our former president, came in, he was very candid about what he saw and how he said, I would have a meeting about enrollment and it would be these 6 people, 7 people. And then we were going to have a meeting on diversity. And then the same people get up from the table and walk into the next room. It's the same people, right? And so he really wanted to really make, shared governance a real thing, where it was really different people with equal say at the table. And a lot of us bought into that because we love that idea of giving more people a voice with the understanding that consensus is not always getting everybody to agree on something. And the people on the 3rd floor get the big paychecks. So you got to make the hard decisions. I think everybody has to understand that at some point, there has to be a decision made. So we don't want things to get bogged down into, you can't please everybody, I don't know if that's Dylan said that or the Stone said that, but somebody said that. But is there any risk of, because it seemed like the one Maricopa thing has sort of drifted off with Rufus, and is there a sense that we could revert back to this sort of top-down, model where less people are at the table? Or do you have a sense that we are going to continue down the path of making sure that everybody has a voice somewhere in the college of how we move forward?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it is up to us, a collective us. And I don't think that we want a top down. We have incredibly talented and intelligent contributors to our Maricopa system, incredible talent set. So it is a shame when we don't reach out and tap into that. And the shared governance focus, absolutely. We must continue to work toward the ideal, tackling what's real and working toward the ideal, right? Not only at the department level, at the college level, at the system level, at all levels, we need to continue to do that. What does that look like? And when I say shared governance, it's not just the shared governance with a capital S and a capital G. We're not just talking about our shared governance coordinating board, a very important part of our system here at MCC. We're talking about the lowercase s and the lowercase g in everything that we do in all areas of the college. How are we including key stakeholders? That's what shared governance is really all about. It's about equity. It's including the voices that are going to be most impacted within any initiative or any problem that's being addressed, including those voices. How do we do that? How do we also encourage and empower those incredibly talented employees that we have to step into those leadership positions? So that is definitely one of the areas that I've been focusing on and trying to communicate to others, because I too have experienced that. And I myself challenge myself thinking, okay, is this a meeting that I need to be at, or is this an opportunity for someone else to be the representative? And even if I determine, okay, I do need to be at this meeting, but maybe I don't need to be leading that meeting, and it could be an opportunity for someone else to be leading that meeting. We need to always think about that. As leaders, all of us as employees of this college, we have opportunities to lead. That's one of the most wonderful parts of being an MCC and an MCCCD employee has been for me over the past quarter of a century. Whew, that's a long time.
2.5 years?
Yeah, right. It has been the incredible opportunities available for growth and development.
Yeah.
And the opportunities for leadership are there. Those of us who are considered leaders or consider ourselves leaders, we need to open up more of those opportunities for others and then truly make it more of a shared governance approach to what we do. It has to be. Yeah. It has to be in order to truly accomplish what we can accomplish, not only for ourselves as an institution, but most importantly for our students and community.
Well, that's what I vote for as an American Indian and a tribal member. I've actually never seen a tribal member in any real position in the 22 years that I've been Maricopa. And the system doesn't lend its way because the ladder is, become a chair, become a dean, become a VP, become a president. Well, unfortunately, those are elected officials at the chair. And I think we had one fella in reading. I think there was only 3 or 4 people in the department. I've never seen it, and I would love at some point to see that happen, because I think that, like you say, there's so much talent out there, but people don't have the opportunity because of the way we're structured. And it just seems to sort of repeat itself. So that was one of the things that I really liked about Rich. He wanted to break that kind of stuff up and give people a fair chance based on their talent, not how many votes they could garner, because that doesn't work for everybody.
Well, that's something else that we need to keep in mind, is that we can't rely on individuals only. It needs to be groups of folks that are coming together and pushing for what's needed. The individual makes an incredible impact, certainly can, but we can't, as a system, rely solely on individuals.
Yeah.
And every individual has a network of support that helps them move the work forward. So we need to tap into each other's gifts and talents to move things forward. Get on the same page so that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish.
I agree. I'd like to explore that individual versus community again sometime. Maybe next semester you'll come back.
It would be my pleasure.
We'll talk again. So we like to give our guests the final word here on, is there anything you'd like to say to the community?
Wow. Thank you. A thank you to the community, because so much we've been challenged with so much. We're continuously challenged with so much. This is a point of transition, but together we really are stronger. And I guess a final message too would be, remember that each one of us is human, and we do our best with what we have. There's a saying that has really stayed with me over the years. An English professor that was doing a presentation from another institution said, every word and every action is either an expression of love or a call for love. How powerful is that? If we keep that in mind too, as we're going through all of these challenges in our lives, it can help us to be more patient with others and with ourselves, more understanding when perhaps others respond to us in ways that we don't see as optimal or productive. We're human, and sometimes we're not at our best. If we want to bring out what's best in others, we do also have to keep that in mind, that humanity that we bring and that others bring to the table. And sometimes we have good days, sometimes we have bad days. But in the long run, my experience at MCC has been the people that I have worked with and that I have served throughout my entire experience here have an incredible passion for helping others and for changing the world and for making a positive impact. And that's what makes me so very proud to be part of MCC and Maricopa Community Colleges and to work alongside such great people. So thank you for being part of that.
Thank you. I want to thank Dr. Reyes for making time for us today. In my dad's language, they say, we'll see each other again, and remember to take care of each other out there. We are all that we have. Hava.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you.